There's been an arrest in the city of Bellevue's only homicide case this year, but there are still a lot of questions, not only about the criminal case against him, but also about safety concerns in the neighborhood. I'm KOMO News reporter Jeremy Harris. I'm going to walk you through the criminal charges and then tell you how the city of Bellevue is responding to some of those concerns from neighbors. Well, let's start with our suspect. His name is Samuel Hitchcock. He is 28 years old, and we first heard about him back in August. And that's when Bellevue police put out the word saying they needed help tracking him down because he was a suspect in a homicide case. What we know about that case is it was back on July 30th, and there were some folks who were living in the Eastgate area of Bellevue. And there are two facilities designed to help the homeless. There's one called the Porch Light, which is a homeless shelter for adult men. Then there's also a Plymouth housing facility, which provides supportive housing for people who are coming out of homelessness. Now, when those facilities opened, there were some concerns from neighbors who said they did not trust that those agencies running those facilities were going to be able to keep a handle on the concerns for the surrounding communities and the impacts on that. Well, we now know that those concerns were at least in part substantiated because two people who had been kicked out of the Porch Light shelter, they were camping in the bushes of a nearby office park. That's where investigators say two men, Samuel Hitchcock and then the victim in this case, Jason Clark, they were camping in the bushes, and they had been laying down in the bushes drinking alcohol in the early morning hours. It's estimated this happened around 1 a.m. when one of them was spilled alcohol on the other. According to a witness who was there, they said that Hitchcock had spilled alcohol on the victim, who is Clark, and that started an argument between them. The witness says that argument escalated to the point where Hitchcock started beating the victim and eventually walked out of the area after taking what detectives described was $3,000 that the victim, Jason Clark, had on him. Now, it's important to note, he had $3,000 in cash on him, and he was sleeping in a bush in the Eastgate neighborhood of Bellevue. Really a concerning set of facts, but it also has criminal implications because prosecutors not only charged Hitchcock with murder for killing Jason Clark, they also charged him with robbery for taking that money off of him. We know Hitchcock, according to Bellevue police, fled the area. The victim was discovered later that morning by a security guard at the office park who was making her rounds. She found him in a bush, called for police. They showed up. He was dead. The medical examiner's office determined that he was killed by blunt force trauma, that multiple blunt force trauma, suggesting that he was beaten to death. Bellevue police put the word out, we need help locating Samuel Hitchcock. He eventually was located. It took about a month, though. He was just located this week in the Portland area where detectives say that he had previous ties. Now, anytime that criminal charges are filed, so that's what we have here, the prosecutors, they make a statement for why they think there should be bail imposed in this case. And that's where they sort of briefly lay out sort of the seriousness of the allegations. And there's definitely some things in the prosecutor's statement here that stick out to me. So that's what I'm going to read for you now. So according here, we have Obney Burns, who's one of the senior deputy prosecuting attorneys at the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Here's what she says. She says, the defendant is accused of beating a man to death with his hands for the money in his pocket. The victim was known to the defendant. The fatal beating was witnessed by a vulnerable wheelchair-bound witness. Now the prosecutor goes on. Given the extreme level of violence and the lack of impulse control exhibited by the defendant, the state has community safety concerns if the defendant is released. The defendant had extensive police contacts in the area recently, including several arrests. She goes on to list some of the warrants, but then what really sticks out to me here. The state believes that a bail of $3 million is appropriate given the extreme level of violence the state is alleging was perpetrated by the defendant in this robbery turned murder. He beat the victim to death for the money in his pocket and told him he was an idiot for having money on him as he beat him to death. Hitchcock is a known flight risk as evidenced by the recent warrants for failure to appear in Seattle Municipal Court. These open cases both involve violence and use of weapons, which further raises concerns for community safety. So the prosecutors asked for $3 million bail. That will be addressed when Hitchcock is brought back to King County from Portland, which likely will happen sometime in the next few weeks. Again, he was just barely arrested this week in the Portland area. Now, as far as the charges go out, there's some stuff also here that stands out to me in that there was a witness who was with Hitchcock and Clark as they were in the bushes drinking. The witness gave very, very good information to police about exactly what happened. One of the things that sticks out to me, the witness told police during the altercation that the witness heard Hitchcock tell Clark he was an idiot for carrying so much money. Now, where did this money come from? How does a homeless person sleeping in a bush end up with $3,000 in their pocket? Well, investigators wanted an answer to that. They went back to the staff at the nearby homeless shelter. That staff told them that they had actually given Clark a ride to the bank where he withdrew the money. He paid a $200 bill at a self-storage facility, and then presumably he was left with around the $3,000 in cash in his pocket. Obviously concerning, any amount of cash carrying with you is going to make you a vulnerable target, but in this case, apparently, according to the charges, Hitchcock knew that the victim had this money on him when he beat him to death, took the money, and then left. And in fact, the witness even told investigators that Hitchcock had offered him some of the money that he had taken off the victim after beating him to death. Really concerning allegations. So you can imagine, listen, a murder in any community is going to raise concerns by people who are in that community. But here in the Eastgate area of Bellevue, there's even more to the story, because when these two facilities, Porchlight and Plymouth Housing, opened a couple of years ago, the neighbors were very concerned because they said they were worried that there was going to be spillover into the community and that problems in this shelter were going to basically pour out into the community. According to the charges, that's exactly what happened here, because investigators say that both men, Clark and Hitchcock, had recently been kicked out of the Porchlight homeless facility, but they chose to stay in that area, and in this case, they were camping in the bushes. When I went out there shortly after the murder happened, I was talking with some of the security guards, some of the businesses there that surround these homeless facilities, and they told me the same thing. They said, we're constantly dealing with people who are using drugs, we're dealing with people who are trespassing, a lot of safety concerns there in the Eastgate area of Bellevue. Well, that came to a head this week when the Bellevue City Council called the leadership of these facilities in front of the city council, basically to give a progress report on how things are going. And you can imagine members of the community showed up and told them not well.
I have the police scanner on every day because we're just terrified of what's next.
Repeated concerns voiced by the community have not been fully and timely addressed by Porchlight or the city.
They are concerned about safety issues, not just at the homeless campus itself, but also in the surrounding community. And certainly the murder did not help those concerns, as those neighbors say. More needs to be done to control who's coming in and what's going on around the shelters. Even if this wasn't on the shelter property itself, it was right next to it. It was an office park that directly is adjacent to that homeless facility where this murder occurred. And so that was one of the main concerns there. We heard from the neighbors who spoke before the city council. The leadership there for the facilities acknowledged to the city council, we know there are safety concerns. They're working to improve security, but certainly that did little to allay the concerns from the neighbors, many of whom have turned to documenting a lot of the concerns online and sharing that information among those neighborhood groups. So where does everything go from here? Well, in the specific murder case involving Samuel Hitchcock, like I said, he'll have to be brought back to King County, extradited from Oregon. Then they'll decide if a judge grants that $3 million bail request. Then the criminal case against him will proceed. As for the neighborhood, those neighbors tell me their plan is to keep the pressure on the city council, to put the pressure in turn on the homeless facilities, both Porchlight and then Plymouth Housing, to come up with a better safety plan to make sure that they're addressing those things like drug use, like people who are maybe trespassed or kicked out of the homeless shelter, which in this case, both suspect and victim appear to be, and then also working with Bellevue Police to make sure that they have a presence in that area. Still yet to be seen what's going to happen, but we'd love to hear what are your thoughts? What do you think the city of Bellevue should be doing, and how would you feel if a facility like this for the homeless came into your neighborhood, and what would you want to see done to make sure that there aren't safety concerns and certainly acts of violence going on around that facility? Let us know in the comments, and then you can also reach out to me. Again, I'm Jeremy Harris with KOMO News. You can email me or find me on social media. My tag is @JeremyHarrisTV, or you can email me jeremyharris@komonews.com. Thanks.